It is so good to be here. I'm very excited. First time in the Philippines. And, I hope it's not the last time. I've had about 3 cups of coffee, so I'm pretty geeked up right now. This is a festive occasion, okay? We're making history. I know that's been said, but we really are. This is a big deal right here. And I just want everyone to give themselves a round of applause for being here. A lot of times, I've been hearing people coming out the closet, being there's a lot of in the closet atheists that are afraid to come out. When you come out, don't tiptoe out, come boldly out, okay? The reason is because where would this world be without the free thinkers? Where would this world be without the atheists? Most of us, I've met many people here on Facebook. They're on my Facebook page. It was a free-thinking atheist, okay, who made that possible. We've been texting on our cell phones. That came from a free-thinking atheist. So what would they do without us? So let's be proud of who we are and what we represent. We don't need to apologize for thinking rationally. Okay? It's good to see everyone here. It's our time now. It's the thinking people, the rational people. It's our time. We have allowed religion to operate for centuries, and it was called the Dark Ages. Now it is the age of information. And by the way, God hates the internet. God hates Facebook. But, I want to thank everyone who made this possible. John, Tony, where are you, Tony? He came and got me at the airport. Okay, thank you. Appreciate it. Well, I'm telling you, that was the longest plane ride, I'm telling you. But trust me, that will be obsolete in the future. And it will be an atheist, a free thinker who creates teleportation. I want to thank Marissa especially, and Dean Hobie, who's not here. Marissa, thank you. I sent some books here to the library a couple of months ago. I'm going to send more. My second book, The New Doubting Thomas. The Bible, Black Folks, and Blind Belief. Okay? And, as African Americans and the people in the Philippines, we have a lot in common. Okay? We both have been conquered, have religion forced upon us, and we're both good in basketball. Marissa, this is your book. This is my first book. Holy Lockdown, Does the Church Limit Black Progress? Okay, and it asks the question, why are there many churches yet major problems in the black community? Why are blacks amongst the most Jesus-praising people in the world, yet the most fragmented and economically dependent? And is there a correlation between high praising and low productivity? So Marissa, this is for you right here. Thank you. Yes. Everyone has been so hospitable. This has been a great experience. Even though I did find a Bible in my room in the hotel. But I have something that I wrote on Facebook, if you visit my page there. And it says, to ignore all of the innocent suffering in the world, yet maintain the belief that a singular, omnipotent God is personally blessing you with special favors is an assumption that is egotistical and arrogant. You know, God woke me up this morning. Isn't that something? And he had to wake up 7 billion other people, and about 50 million other species had to wake up. You know, there are people who get in car crashes, fatal car crashes, after they wake up. Why can't you just let them sleep it out, you know? So, a little bit about my background. Yes, I was an aspiring preacher. You know, it's really funny because somebody mentioned, I think Dan Barker said that, you know, being a reverend is no big deal. Each and every one of us can go online right now and become ordained in about 10 minutes. Okay? It's not a big deal. But I did go to seminarian school, and I've been a Pentecostal holiness. I was a Jehovah's Witness. I was a Muslim. I was, of course, born Baptist, whatever that is. I've been through the gamut of religion. And I think it was Isaac Asimov that says the Bible well read is the biggest case for atheism. So I've seen a lot of things. When my family, and let me just say this before I get into my background a little bit, but it can be done. I've been married, this is my wife here, which she makes this possible also. And we've been married for 23 years in June, right? We have 3 children. And listen, I'm not bragging on my children because you brag on them on Tuesday and they do something stupid on Wednesday, okay? I'm just letting you know that we never took them to church. We never put up a Christmas tree. We never worshiped a God. We never worshiped a Jesus. And they're doing fine, and we're doing fine, and it can be done, okay? I have to admit, though, we did go to a church when we got married, and he screwed my name up and pronounced my wife's name wrong, and so, but that was about as close to religion as we got, you know. But again, I was aspiring to be a minister, and there was just some things that bothered me. And what I have to say today, hopefully, see, the key is to be able to listen and be able to convey it effectively to the believers. There's no point in hearing the messages today unless we can take it, internalize it, digest it, and then not so much regurgitate it word for word, but conceptualize it to where we really get the gist of what's being said, that we can convey it effectively to our family, to our friends who are still believers. And it matters what they believe because we're in a world with a lot of delusional people. So it does matter what we believe. But some of the similarities that we have here, you know, when we moved to Atlanta, if you all know anything about Atlanta, I'm sure you've seen that some of the movies are based in Atlanta. Atlanta is like 75% African Americans, okay? When we moved there, we come from the north. We came from Cincinnati in Ohio. So we moved to Atlanta. We've been there 16 years. When we moved to Atlanta, we noticed that people would ask us what church we went to before they would even ask us our names. Okay, religion is just so pervasive in Atlanta. We have the largest percentage of the black mega churches based in Atlanta. So if you tell someone that you're a non-believer or an atheist or free thinker or whatever, the African American community especially, and see if you all can identify with this, they look at you as if you've broken the law. But you have to remember, if you really want a good grip on the United States, and you really want to learn about the precepts, the laws, just you know, get the full flavor of America, understand the state of Virginia. If you know Virginia, you got a good grip on America, because that's where most of the laws and the precepts of law were implemented, were signed into law. And one of the laws were, while blacks were enslaved, and I agree, Mr. Barker, I don't say that we were slaves. We were enslaved. We were not slaves. That is an absolute term. And I don't call it the North Atlantic slave trade, because the ocean had nothing to do with it. Okay? So we have to watch out for these little words, okay? But there was a law in Virginia that made it mandatory that we adopt the religion of the dominant culture. So in a sense, by being a non-believer now, in a sense, I am breaking the law, because there was never a law that reversed that. Okay? So we're looked upon, you know, it's growing. We have a non-believers group in Atlanta, so it is growing. But there was a lot of things that bothered me on my way to becoming a minister. And you can, you know, convey this, and maybe you can relate to this. I found it troubling when I noticed the percentage of my prayers that weren't being answered. Yeah, that bothered me. The Bible is a book of promises. Actually, it's a promissory note. That's what the Bible is. It promises you that certain things will happen to you if you do certain things. And every one of us of age who's had children, who has, you know, had life experiences, we know that life is not promised. I mean, you know, things in life are not promised. Just like yesterday, me and my wife were trying to cross the streets here in Manila. We almost got hit by a car. So our lives could have been taken right then. It's not promised, okay? That bothered me. I got to thinking about that. But one of the things that really disturbed me, if you notice about Christianity, is that just like the Spaniards enslaved the people of the Philippines, we were also enslaved. But the funny thing about Christianity is that it doesn't require any reimbursement from what was stolen from you. Think about that. They came in, they removed us from our land, we were kidnapped, we were transported to America, our resources were stolen, we don't own any of the mines in Africa, we don't own the oil rigs and the gold mines, we don't own any of that. We are not in complete control of our wealth generating resources. So when we go through Africa and we see that these countries declare their independence, independence from what? To me, there's really no such thing as independence without being able to control your wealth generating resources. You're still dependent. But one of the things, you know, about that, about when they stole our resources, they were not required to give anything back. The Bible never states that. It may have been a totally different dynamic if it says, whatever you take, thou shalt give back. Never said that. So that means that generations will prosper from the colonization. You will have children that will go to the best of schools. This is why I know that there's no, you know, God throwing darts on bad people and rewarding good people. If there was a God that had a personality, then the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria would have sank before all this got started, okay? So this is why that there is no, you know, benevolent being that's watching over us. And another thing that disturbed me, being a believer in God, in the Bible, is not a biological requirement. When people ask me, do I believe in God? I said, do I need to? Air is a biological requirement. Water is a biological requirement. Rest, etc. Belief in a God is not a biological requirement. How do we know that? We know that because there are non-believers all over the world that are thriving and that are prospering and are not spontaneously combusting. Okay, that's how we know. If I sat up here and tried to hold my breath, it's not going to work out for too long. But I can be a non-believer for as long as I want. I used to think that when I converted from belief to non-belief, that leap was like 50 stories down. Turns out it's about that far of a drop. It's nothing. So we don't have anything to fear, okay? And then I opened the book up, and here it is, my ancestors are from Africa. And I opened this book, and I'm scratching my head. I'm like, wait a minute now. Why am I opening books called Romans? Why am I opening books that says Hebrew and Corinthians? And Galatians. Why aren't these books, why don't they say, Ghanaians or Malians or Ethiopians or, you see what I mean? Yeah. Is that not a clue? Should not a red light go off? Yeah. I mean, if this book was for you, it would say, turn to, the Philippines chapter such and such, such and such.
That's Philippians, but not Philippines.
Yeah. Philippians, but not Philippines. So you have to ask yourself, if my people are not in it, what does this have to do with me? This is not a need. It's not a biological requirement. Also, there are, being religious, there's a joke in America. If a white person falls off a building in America and they live, they'll say they were lucky. If a black falls off a building and lives, it was Jesus. We are notoriously religious, okay? You can help a black person on the side of the street and, their tire is broken, out of air, and you fix them up. Hell, you even give them a tune-up on the way. And they will say, thank you, Jesus. And here it is, you put all this effort into doing this. We don't give credit to ourselves. And maybe you can identify with that. I don't know. But there's a different dynamic with religion because we too were forced. It was a shotgun relationship with religion that we had. We didn't have any choice. But one of the things that you have to keep in mind is that the extreme measures that black people had to go through in order to convince the slave owner that we had seen the light and heard the voice of Jesus in order to receive less harsher punishments. There was a difference between an enslaved black and a Christian enslaved black. There was a difference. You got less lashes. So now, if there was a black who was a non-believer on the plantation, he made it bad for everybody. You see? So this is why when you say you're a non-believer from people who have, been conquered, people look at you, but they don't know what your ancestors went through. They were not given a real choice. You can either believe or you can, take this. So we kind of, I guess we can kind of understand what they went through. We have to know why we believe in the first place. How did we arrive at where we are psychologically? How did we arrive at reading a book that doesn't even mention us, that has no references to our, that condones our enslavement. And then we embrace this book. There's something pathologically wrong with that. It's like, it's a disease. Blacks are suffering from religious intoxication. Okay? Every group, with the exception of blacks, can see that our slip is showing. But we don't see it. Why? Because we're intoxicated. When people are intoxicated, the obvious things escape them. Just like the driver who's drunk, he's not aware he's on the wrong side of the road. The person who is drunk with religion is not even aware that it has nothing to do with you in the first place because he's drunk. When you're drunk, the obvious things escape you. Okay? And that's what we're suffering from. One of the things is that we find ourselves now looking for two things. That's Jesus' return and hitting the lottery. Which is really the same thing. Well, the odds of hitting the lottery is even a little greater than that. But blacks are now, we have been conditioned to rely on the supernatural to solve all of our problems. Here's the problem with that. When you rely on the supernatural to solve your problems, you will ultimately be forced to rely on the supernatural to solve your problems. Why? Because blacks have been conditioned and trained to use prayer as their first line of defense. Whenever a leader, such as our so-called leader, comes into our communities to correct a problem, the first thing that they do is say, "Let us pray." What that does is automatically establish a mindset that will now expect godly intervention to solve a problem. So what happens when you are conditioned and trained to use prayer as your first line of defense? Generation after generation after generations go by without you having to think critically to solve your problems. We've been told, don't worry about it, Jesus will take care of it. We've been taught to lean on the everlasting arms of Jesus. And that has stayed with us for generations. And that has impaired our ability to think logically and rationally and clearly to overcome many of our issues. One of the worst things that have ever happened, and see if you can identify with this, to happen to blacks is the saying, walk by faith and not by sight. Now, I find that very strange because when you walk by faith and not by sight, and they also, here's the other damaging, saying, lean not unto your own understanding. Okay? When you tell a person not to think for themselves and to lean not to your own understanding, what you are doing is you are encouraging that person not to utilize one of the most important organs in their body, which is their brain. Isn't that funny? Because you would never tell them to underutilize any other organ in their body, such as their lungs, such as their liver, such as their kidneys. In fact, you would tell a person, stop smoking to save your lungs. But when it comes to your brain, don't use your brain. It has been extremely damaging to us. We're still doing that. But I understand why and how we arrived at where we are. And this is what you all have to do. Understand why. How, because if you don't know how you arrived at where you are psychologically, it's almost impossible to correct that deal. we had to build mountains of hope in order to placate or allay our predicament. We had to think that there would be another day, that there would be a better day, that somebody would come along and grab us and escort us to another place where there would be no more pain, where there would be no more suffering, where there would be no more injustice. So that was very appealing to black people. Hope was a necessary ingredient. Okay? In seminarian school, they tell you this right here. They say, preach to the itching ear. In other words, tell the people what they want to hear, not what they need to hear. So this is why, I can go to church when I get back to Atlanta, and I'll hear the same things I've been hearing since I was 5 years old. The rhetoric doesn't change because the ultimate goal is still to lean in the everlasting arms of Jesus. So that's been damaging to us. Now, why? Blacks have a story of exclusion. We were excluded. Enslavement, segregation, injustice, exclusion. So the Bible included us. When Jesus came along, we heard that story. Jesus said, all are welcome. The educated, the non-educated, the sick, everybody. It was all inclusive. So that was appealing to us to think that, wow, we're mistreated, but here's this man that looks like our oppressor, by the way, that says we're included. That felt good to know that. You see, we wanted to believe that these stories in the Bible were true. We wanted to believe that there was a time in history where God dealt directly with human beings. And he took us from the person or the being that created them. That's what's in our mind when we read Genesis. Oh, they were the first ones out of Eden, so they had to have somebody telling them what to do. Forget how languages evolve. The Bible, a lot of our history has been lost. And the Bible included us in their family. And we are all connected. We found a connection. And guess what we're connected by? A single sin that happened in a garden. This is what connects us to the Bible, because a lot of our history was lost, so the Bible was meaningful. It was important to us. I mean, can you see the similarities in how people that were conquered would behave? How we would embrace the culture and the paradigm of our oppressor. Here's the one thing that we did wrong, though. There is a difference between assimilation and acculturation. Assimilation is when you just drop your culture, everything about it, and embrace the dominant culture. Acculturation is when you keep some of your culture and embrace, not necessarily embrace, but do what you have to in order to get by. See, we didn't do that. If we did that, I wouldn't be here now, and the Philippines wouldn't be 85% Catholic. We both have adopted and embraced the belief system of the same people who conquered us. That's insanity. That's insanity. So it gave us a sense of belonging. Also, let's fast forward a few, 300 and something years. The Philippine people were under Spanish rule. And then another, 40 years from American rule? Okay. So let's look at the many generations who just embraced their belief without knowing the history of it. Let's look at that for a minute. That's called imprinting. Have anybody heard of the man Konrad Lorenz? Konrad Lorenz was an Austrian zoologist who took 12 geese. Okay, follow me closely. He took 12 geese. He separated them. He put 12 geese eggs. He took 6 geese eggs and put them in a man-made incubator. He took the other 6 eggs and he put them with their natural mom to hatch. What happened? When the eggs hatched from the natural mom, the mother goose, they followed her into the water. When the 6 eggs hatched from the incubator, the first eyes that those little chicks saw was Konrad Lorenz. Guess what they did? They followed him into the water. They even began to court him. They thought he was their mother. This is the same with religion. When the dust cleared and after reconstruction and after many generations went by without knowing the story, when we opened our eyes, the first Savior we saw was Jesus. So we followed him. We didn't know any better. And our parents, out of fear, because a lot of people go to church and embrace religion because they're afraid not to. They're afraid of the consequences. So when you embrace the culture of the people who once enslaved you, that is the biggest indication that you are afraid. And you did what you had to do in order to stay alive. Okay? So Jesus was the first Savior that we saw. That's all we know. Even though there, somebody mentioned it. When people ask me, Jeremiah, do you believe in God? I say, which one? There are 300 million gods in India alone. And if you say God is good, I know that you just can't possibly pull yourself to think anything differently, or you haven't read your Bible. Because especially the book of Joshua, you can't read that on an empty stomach. It is just one of the most bloodiest books that you will ever read. There's nothing benevolent about this God of the Bible. So we don't have to apologize for being non-believers. All we got to do is say, have you read your Bible lately? Tell me about that God in the Bible. I want to hear about it. Death to all non-believers. Death to the entire village. Death to homosexuals. Death to everyone who embraces another God. Death for your children talking back to you. Death for everything. So now, if we are so-called made in God's image, well, you wouldn't kill your children for those things. So how does this God even relate to you? We are more benevolent, more generous, more loving than the very God that we so-called worship in this book. Humanity is now more godly than the God of the Bible. Isn't that something? Now, let's just look at some of the things. I just want to show how, well, first, let me just point this out, okay? So we can understand the why and we can convey this more effectively, okay? Let me show you how the God game works. This is a God game. We're victims of the God game. We've been conned. We've been had. We've been bamboozled. I mean, I'm not trying to sound like Malcolm X up here, but we've been all those things. We've been tricked. Here's what happens. Those that are in power, they always use religion as the transport system into the psychology of the people that they conquer. Okay? So what happens? The conquerors of various people ultimately start providing the resources to those people, right? They take your resources, and now they're in control of the resources. So over time, it will appear as a naturally superior group over a naturally inferior group. We have had an inferiority complex. So now what happens is that once that perception has been established, then it's easier for the conqueror to convince the conqueror, the people that they conquer, that their position in life has been divinely inspired, divinely, arranged. We were told we were in the position we were in because we were inferior. Blacks can't think, so we're going to do the thinking for you. And even though we pretended, who said that? We pretended for a while. Somebody at this table said we pretend for a minute, but then we start, to believe it, or some way it was worded a little bit better. But now we bought into the idea that we are subordinate.
We forgot we were pretending.
We forgot we were pretending. It's all a game. If you were conquered, think about it. If you were conquered by Spain, you know that your ancestors had to pretend to be into this stuff in order to stay alive. But as time goes on, you forget that you're pretending. And if you say that you love this God, and if you say that you really embrace this book, you're still pretending, because no, you don't. You don't know anything about it. Because if you knew something about it, you wouldn't embrace it. Because it's absolutely crazy. But that is so, the dream of the conquered is so, to become like their conqueror is so great. That's why, someone told me here in Manila yesterday, said, we all claim to have Spanish blood in us. It's just like, the black man in America, the black woman in America. We want to be something other. We want to identify with something other than who we are. Because to embrace who we are is a very painful experience. It's embarrassing to embrace a book where you had no part, like this Bible. You look at it, the best-selling book in the world. Can you imagine how many trees had to be cut down? So we know that off the top that God is not an environmentalist. Okay? To have this book, you need ink, you need trees, you need paper, you need proselytizers, you need marketing, you need distribution. It did not teach morality. The Bible did not come along and invent love. They have a saying, when the Europeans arrived in Africa, they came with the Bible, we had the land. When they left, we had the Bible and they had the land. Now think about it for a second. We good without who? We can be good without God. All right. Yes, we can. Why? We're social animals. Deer are social animals. Wolves are social animals. It's a sad commentary on a human being to think that they cannot exist without a mythological God, when other species can do it. We have learned that it's best. Let me tell you where morality came from. Morality comes from group cooperation. We have learned over the years that we can't go around clubbing each other in the head if we expect to have families and build units. So we've evolved into people who we know how to get along. We can exist without this book. This is not a biological requirement, so we don't even need to trip that hard. Okay? My wife always says this: it ain't that serious. It's not. It's just a book. It's full of ink and paper. It's just a book. That's all. There's nothing holy about it. It's a book. Now, if we look at some of the symptoms that we have, and we see that we are suffering from paranoia, schizophrenia. Think about it. People who are religious are suffering from paranoia, schizophrenia. You don't believe me? You doubt that? Let's look at some of the symptoms then. Delusions of control. Delusions of control are when a paranoid schizophrenic believes that they are not in control or they are only partially in control of their lives. We think God is behind the wheel of our lives doing the driving. He's steering the wheel. We think that the only person that's going to do for you today and tomorrow and who did for you yesterday is that person that you see when you look in the mirror. That's it. If God punishes bad and rewards good, you would see a whole reversal of the dynamics in the world. 65 to 75% of all the wars, the skirmishes, and the battles are attributed to religious differences. All they are is God pissing contests. That's it. Whose God is the baddest? That's it. So then you have delusions of grandeur. Now check this one out. This causes people to think that they're in some way extremely important or famous or connected to someone who is very important. Look at the preacher. You would think he has God's cell number. Okay? He places a degree of importance on himself. And let me tell you, do not let the smooth taste fool you. In other words, that meek little sister that comes to you and says, oh, love God with all your heart because I have accepted God and God has changed my life. No, that woman is egotistical. That is ego that tells you that out of 7 billion people, that God is specifically focusing on you and granting you some personal favors. Oh, God bless me. Just like the other day, there was a car accident in Atlanta. One got killed and the other one didn't. He said, I just thank God I'm alive. Well, what about the person who just killed? I thank God that he killed him and not me. It doesn't make sense. We don't have to apologize for being smart. We don't have to apologize for being rational. It's not a big deal. We're smart. We've let go of mythology. We are in a modern world now. We've let go of, we know what makes it rain now. We know that's not God crying. We know what causes thunder. That's not God cracking his joints. We know what causes earthquakes. That's not God taking a walk. This is for primitive people. Let them have their primitive beliefs. We've moved on. We've evolved. All right, you've got delusions of reference. Delusions of reference are when a sufferer of paranoid schizophrenia believe they caused or in some way directly connected to a major event. You see that? You know, it was a reason where so-and-so sat beside me on the plane. If there wasn't a such thing as coincidence, there wouldn't be a word called coincidence. It's okay with coincidences. Nothing's wrong with that. What happens is we're trying to bring some type of purpose to chaos, some type of meaning to everything. Doesn't have to have a meaning. It just is. Okay? Then you have disorganized speech. Is another attribute or characteristic of paranoid schizophrenia. Speaking in tongues. I don't know what the hell you're saying. Isn't it amazing that after you speak in tongues, isn't it amazing that after you speak in tongues, you can't tell me what you just said? And people can play that game. You know, they can play that game. They can speak in tongues. I just haven't learned that language yet. Okay. And now, here's another one. Another product of paranoia, schizophrenia. Suicidal thoughts. Now wait a minute before you say, oh, Jeremiah, we got you there. We're believers, but we don't think about killing ourselves because God says that if you commit suicide, that's the only sin that you won't be forgiven for, right? Wait a minute. I come from the Baptist church. You have to put to death. Put yourself to death and be born again. That's a form of suicide. You got to kill the old you. It's a form of suicide. I mean, think about this stuff is crazy, isn't it? We don't have to apologize for this. Here's one. Auditory hallucinations. I heard God speak to me. I heard a voice. When preachers come to you and they tell you that they felt a burning in their heart, that God called them, they felt the burning in their heart, that wasn't God, that was those chili dogs that they ate the night before. But you also have anxiety. That's another side effect of paranoid schizophrenia. Anxiety. What are we anxious about? What are we experiencing anxiety about? Jesus returning, coming back, getting our house together, going about our day wondering what would Jesus do? Would Jesus do that? Would Jesus do that? And we're guilty. I saw a sign that says guilt-free sex is tremendous. But we have anxiety. Do you know that grief is not just the sadness that you feel from the loss of something or someone? Grief is also unmet expectations. We're grieving. You know, our family members and people who are believers, we're grieving because Jesus has not showed up yet. I'm 85 years old and this rascal hasn't come yet. You know, then you've got emotional distance. You ever notice those people who become religious and 2 weeks later they know everything and they thank God for finding a good parking space. They thank God for everything. They become emotionally distant. Now they can't be around you because you're a sinner and all that kind of stuff. It's crazy. It's paranoia, schizophrenia. Then you've got violence. Look at the conflicts that are going on in the world. My God's better than your God pissing contest. All over the world. So when we come out boldly. You know, the Bible is simply like, you know the movie, the sitcom I Dream of Jeannie? You remember that? I'm dating myself. It's like, the Bible is like a genie bottle. And inside of this bottle is this magical genie that is going to grant you all of your wishes. But if he doesn't come in this lifetime, he'll certainly come in the next lifetime. You know, to escort you on a magic carpet ride to heaven. It's like a genie bottle. All you got to do is just keep rubbing on it. Just keep praying to it. Stay on your knees, and something good will happen. It's magical. It's fairy tale. You know, in the black community, and I know this is true in the Catholic world also, there is rarely a car that does not have Mary in it. The rosary beads. I wouldn't say every, but a large percentage of black people's cars, probably over 50%, have a Bible stuck in the back. You know, it's just a rabbit's foot. It's a good luck charm. It's a genie bottle. Here's something that took over 1,500 years to compile. With what, 40, 50 authors, companies. You had to have a printing press. You had to have the consent of the government. It's a lot of things. It just is not an organic thing that grew off of a tree. is not anything that's sacred. So I just, I want to close and just say that, understand those things, that you're okay. Your children are going to be fine. It's not a big jump. It's just a book. And in this book, you would think that Genesis was the first book written, right? But it's not. But it starts with Genesis. It's not even the oldest book. We don't know these things because we're still in the introductory level of our beliefs. We just believe what we've been told. And I'm speaking like this so we can convey these things to our family members and our friends, and we can grow stronger in our arguments with religious apologists, religious apologists or whatever. But I just want to say that it's been beautiful being here. I'm so happy that this is spreading throughout the world. It's amazing. We still have a lot of places to go and to touch, and we have a lot of work to do. But we can be proud and stand up strong and not apologize for being correct and being sensible. So I appreciate you all's time. Thank you very much for inviting me.
I'd like to know, have you been able to go throughout the United States with your message? Because you strike me as someone who would be a good reverse preacher, talking against things already around. I think if more people have the opportunity to hear what you said, the way you said it, we might be able to move along even more closely. So if you had many invitations, and I'd also like to extend an invitation to you at some point to speak to our group in Buffalo.
No doubt. And how did I start this out? It's about how you convey the message. We have to be effective in the way we convey it, but we have to have confidence in what we stand for. There's no reason to be ashamed of being sensible and rational and logical. But yes, I've spoken in several churches in the United States. Churches in Brooklyn, churches in Atlanta. I even spoke at the Interdenominational Theological College twice. They invited me. And I had to tell them, listen, you know what I'm about, right? You've read my book, right? And one of the things I did, how many are familiar with my slave sermons, movies? Wow, I know I'm not in America now. When you get a chance, go to YouTube and type in slave sermons. Yeah, and I'm telling you, I noticed one thing. It's one thing to get up and talk about it. It's another thing to write books about it. It's an entirely different experience to actually see how religion contributes to our psychological demise. And they're just little mini movies that I show you just the ridiculousness, if that's a word. If it isn't, it is now. The ridiculousness of our religious beliefs. It's crazy. And what I do is show you in these movies how they affect us. So they're called slave sermons.
You talk about delusions, different kinds of delusions. I have this experience during my college days. I have a biology professor who tells us that that when the person dies, he is lighter. When a person is alive, he is heavier. Then when a person dies, he is lighter. And that weight, according to he is a biology teacher, and according to him, the weight was the weight of the soul. So I said, Professor, the reason why the weight, there is a weight loss, because of course the elements in the body, the oxygen, etc. is gone. So he told me, do not question my scientific credentials. So I said, sir, I'm not questioning your scientific credential. I'm just questioning your mixture of beliefs and science. Then he failed me. Not failed, but gave me 75 grade. So what kind of delusion is that? You are a teacher, you are a scientist, then you are teaching your students weird things and failing. Thank you.
You know, one of the things about it, now let's see, who can I? Ruben. All right. I need a volunteer here. People, you know, the religious community, they always ask the question. They're scared, right? They're motivated by fear. Let me just say this one thing about fear very quickly, and I'm going to address your comment. The only genes that get passed on from all species are the genes that help you survive better. You see what I mean? So while blacks were enslaved, and while the people of the Philippines were enslaved, fear was a good thing. Because not being afraid could have gotten us killed. We were afraid to look at the master in the eye. We were afraid to get caught reading. We were afraid to get caught running away. We were afraid to do an inadequate job out in the field. So it became part of our psyche. So being afraid almost tend to develop into a fear gene. You understand? Because we passed that on. Being afraid was a good thing. It helped us survive. You know, if you got caught reading and your mother saw you, you know, trying to learn how to read and you were enslaved, she would slap the taste out of your mouth. Don't you ever read again. Why? Because she loved you. She wanted you to stay alive. So being afraid to get caught reading was pervertedly a good thing. So it was all based off of fear. But now, it's this fear of where do we go when we die? What does death feel like? And I mean, you know, there have been more people that have died than there are alive today. Okay? So obviously, death is not a spooky thing. Because it's something that, you know, you will physically expire. Now, I have a theory on what death feels like. Okay? Ruben, what year were you born?
1961.
1962?
61.
1961?
Yes.
Death feels like everything prior to 1961. You were not, I mean, here's the thing. If God is within you, here's the so-called spiritual people. You've got your religious people, and then you've got your spiritual people. I'm not religious, but I'm spiritual. And they say, well, God is within me. Okay, so if God is within you, I thought God is eternal, right? Well, yeah. Okay, if you were born in 1961, then where were you in 1861 when we were getting captured? Where were you in 1761? You weren't around. So God was within you. Oh, so God was born when you were born. So that makes you a God then, right? I mean, you see how confusing this is? So death is whatever year you were born in, death feels like whatever happened, you know, prior to the year you were born.
It's interesting that you mentioned death because a lot of people, especially the believers, would use death or particularly near-death experiences to justify that there is indeed a God and an afterlife. So what's your take on these stories of near-death experiences, sir?
They all say they saw a bright light. That's because you were on the operating table. You were not fully unconscious. And that bright light was those doctors working on you.
Sir, after the Second World War, say in Germany, the Jews filed a lawsuit against the German government and got paid for all the damages done to them during the war. In the United States, Japanese Americans were all arrested and put into a hamlet in Arizona. After the war, they all filed a suit, and they got monies back, an average of about $20,000 each. I understand there was a bill introduced in U.S. Congress to get the black slaves paid for all the free work they've done, and the United States government is still benefiting from such work. Like the White House was built by slaves for free, federal buildings. Now I understand this claim is not as active as it used to be. What is being done to reactivate this, to get the black community in the United States paid of the ancestors of the work they've done for the United States?
You know, they're trying to get reparations. You know, I have mixed feelings about that. Because at the state that we're in right now, if we were to get paid, we're just going to give it right back to the church. I mean, you know how you talk about your house being underwater when you owe more than what you own? As a people, we are underwater. Whenever you give more to your churches than you do your institutions of higher learning, you're going to have problems. We're not giving to our historically black universities and colleges. A lady, my wife was telling me, she just hit the lottery for $50,000. She gave $26,000 to the church. You see, but now, as far as the question of reparations is concerned, I think that we will be more, because they're going to say, well, you know, how much do you get? Whom do we give it to? And how will the money be? You know, there's a lot of areas that need to be ironed out in that. But there is one type of reparations that I think we should get, and it's post-enslavement. That is the reparations of crack cocaine being put into our communities with the CIA being directly involved in it. We were poisoned. There have been senators, you've had Ron Paul, you've had John Edwards, and you've had other politicians who have documented proof. There was a man named Gary Webb who ran a 22-day expose in the San Jose Mercury Press that proved beyond a doubt that the CIA was directly involved in bringing drugs to the black community. So I think, you know, let me tell you, blacks in the United States, we're fascinating people. We really are. We have great potential if we can just sober up from religion. But we have a double whammy. We have a double whammy. The first whammy is the drug of religion. The second whammy is the actual drug of crack cocaine, that we will be crawling out from under the rubbish from the debris left behind from crack for many generations. It did a terrible thing to us. It separated the elders from the youth, because an old man who has a lot of wisdom, he would come out inside and say, boy, you shouldn't sell that crack. Man, go back in the house, old man. I've made more money tonight than you have in 5 years on your Social Security. It's put a distaste into black men's mouth for work. Why work 8 hours when I can go out and sell some drugs? So that reparations, to me, should be directed toward the United States government for poisoning. And they've been involved in other poisoning acts. Bad blood, the Tuskegee syphilis, injecting 400 black men with syphilis and allowing them to cohabitate in society and spread the disease. So that would be my reparations as far as the fact that we have been poisoned.
I was thinking the damages done to the black people of the United States all those years, all those centuries, need not be paid in cash, but can be paid via, say, free education, tax exemption, and some other ways, not necessarily in cash.
Well,
so that to benefit the black people that have been, their ancestors at least have been hurt, their grandfathers.
Well, let me tell you, that's going to create a problem. Because without good-natured white people, we wouldn't have half the organizations that we have in Black America. Their consensus is, we have bent over backwards for you guys. We're not the ones out here doing all of this damage. You all are doing it. So they would have a problem with issuing you money, you know, when we've already been through affirmative action, when we've had programs that, you know, initiatives to give blacks, you know, equality and fair treatment. So I don't see that working at all, whether it be cash or whether it be in free anything, not at this point, because we have had many opportunities. Some of the times that we didn't follow through is not necessarily been the fault of blacks. After Reconstruction, we tried to get it together. We were ran out the South by the Ku Klux Klan. During migration to the big cities in the 40s, we were met with immigrants, European immigrants, who thought we were there to take their jobs. With affirmative action, when we were getting houses and when we were becoming upwardly mobile, you had crack cocaine to come in. I'm not making excuses because we've had an opportunity to get our act together. But at this point, the United States is trillions of dollars in debt. We're not going to get a dime at this point, and I don't even think it's, you know, we would have to go to war and shed some blood for that. I don't see that happening.